Good evening. Welcome to the show. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I'm Shawn Yao.
Tonight's big stories. Heavy rains brought about by tropical storm Enteng drenched a good part of the country's eastern portion, triggering landslides and massive flooding in several areas. Work and class suspensions are called again for tomorrow.
The Department of Education gets a dressing down after House lawmakers found it failed to disburse laptops and other teaching equipment fast enough in 2023, but was prompt when it came to consuming confidential funds.
And a Chinese vessel repeatedly rams the Philippine Coast Guard's largest boat, the BRP Teresa Magbanua, which was anchored off Escoda Shoal. The National Maritime Council convenes again to discuss next steps.
We begin tonight with the intense and torrential rains dumped by tropical storm Enteng along the eastern part of the country.
From a low-pressure area off Samar Island, Enteng developed into a tropical storm yesterday afternoon.
Enteng then rapidly made its way up the Bicol region to Quezon and Aurora provinces, dumping heavy rains and causing massive floods. Early this morning, torrential downpour from Enteng hit Calabarzon and Metro Manila.
Laglag na, tuluyan ang
This video
nalaglag.
was taken in Antipolo, Rizal as water from higher ground swept down city streets, taking cars and other debris along its path. And this video was taken along the same street this afternoon, and as you can see, it's as if nothing happened. Now, other areas in Rizal experienced the same flash floods coming from the mountains. This video was taken in Cogio, Antipolo, where a creek turned into a raging river in a matter of minutes. This water eventually made its way down to the low-lying areas of Cainta, Pasig, and Marikina, causing heavy flooding.
Aside from flash floods, heavy rainfall also caused landslides that led to several fatalities. Rio Fernandez has that story.
A pregnant woman along with two teenage siblings lost their lives as this landslide buried their home in Sitio Hinapao, Antipolo City. At the height of this morning's downpour, this part of the hill suddenly caved. The victim's neighbor Jesse was lucky enough that the landslide missed his home.
Paglabas ko po dito sa bahay ko, kasi may butas po yung bubong, tumatagas po. Pumunta ako dito, umikot ako dito. Nililinis ko itong bahay ko. Pagsilip ko dito sa butas ng bahay na ito, nakita ko po kung paano ko magasayan. Seconds lang po, nandito na po yung lupa. Tapos natabunan po yung bahay doon, may 2 patay at saka yung buntis. Inukay namin, nakuha namin siya ng 6 to 7 evening, 7 po ng umaga.
Aside from the casualties in Sitio Hinapao, the body of a woman was recovered in Barangay San Isidro, also in Antipolo. The woman, who's believed to have drowned, has yet to be identified. As of this evening, 7 fatalities have been recorded in Antipolo City. 4 from landslides, while 3 from drowning. As water came down from higher ground, low-lying areas in Antipolo faced heavy flooding. In Barangay San Luis, homes were left submerged with residents awaiting rescue from rooftops. Those who were able to leave early are now staying in evacuation centers as 6 barangays of the city remain flooded. In Cebu, 2 residents also lost their lives after riprap, which are supposed to prevent landslides, collapsed. In Barangay Tisa, a 13-year-old girl died after her home was buried in mud and concrete. The riprap gave way after heavy rains hit the area.
Hindi mo alam, sir. Matanggap mo ba yun? Nabiglaan. Dahil yung riprap na yun talaga ang dahilan, sir.
Just 8 hours after this incident, a riprap in Barangay San Jose, Talamban also collapsed, killing a 27-year-old woman. Authorities said the woman was taking care of her child when the riprap fell on their home. Her child survived.
Sacrifice niya, buhay niya. Tinakpan niya yung maliit na anak ko. Sana matulungan niya po yung mga anak ko kasi maliit pa.
For News 5, Ria Fernandez, We Are One News.
Heavy flooding due to the rains brought about by Tropical Storm Enteng were also reported in some other parts of Luzon. Among those greatly affected were areas in the southern part of Metro Manila, specifically Parañaque City. Last night, flooding in Barangay San Isidro, Parañaque reached near chest level. Some vehicles were nearly submerged in the floodwaters, and motorists were left stranded as some residents used plastic barriers as makeshift boats. Raging floodwaters were also reported in Las Piñas, particularly in Barangay Alon 3. Vehicles by the Alabang exit of the South Luzon Expressway also had a hard time moving due to the floods. This was also the case over at the Zapote Junction, where the road seemingly looked like a river as floods reached waist level. By the next morning, the junction was passable, but the floodwaters still remained gutter deep.
Still in the south, some parts of Laguna remain flooded amid the torrential rains last night. One by one, residents of Carmen Home Subdivision in Barangay San Antonio were rescued early this morning. They were transported using rubber boats due to the waist-deep flood water. Stranded residents at San Pedro Town Center were also rescued. The local government initiated a cleanup drive at San Pedro Muntinlupa Bridge and in Barangay Landayan to remove the trash from the river. Now, according to the Laguna Provincial Disaster Risk Reduction Management Office, 42 barangays were flooded, while over 400 families across Laguna have been evacuated and are currently at evacuation centers.
Wala pong tigil na pagulan simula po kagabi. Gawa po ng pinapalakas po Enteng, yung ating pong southwest monsoon. Kaya po tumataas po yung pong level po ng tubig dito sa mga lugar na ito. At ito po ay nasa po ito, lake along the lake po yung ating Laguna, Dubai.
In Quezon Province, the river in Lucena City has reportedly overflowed, with only large vehicles able to pass through. According to the latest report from the Quezon Provincial Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Office, 200 families have since been evacuated. However, this number may increase if Enteng continues to pound the province. Fortunately, no fatalities have been reported, but there have been individuals reported missing.
May nabanggit po ang Municipal Mayor of Buena Vista, Quezon na may 3 mangingisda sila na nawawala or lumaot kahapon at hindi pa nakakabalik.
Severe flooding was also reported in Camarines Norte, as what you're seeing in these drone photos. This is an aerial view of Barangay Mangkayo and Vinson's Camarines Norte following the onslaught of Enteng. One lane of the bridge on Maharlika Highway in Barangay Lagon, Daet, Camarines Norte has also been closed off due to a landslide on the side of the bridge. Now, going back to Metro Manila, Marikina River water level rose to second alarm at 17.1 meters due to heavy rains brought by Enteng. Second alarm means residents are advised to evacuate. Thankfully, the water level has since receded and is now down to 15.4 meters, or the first alarm at least as of 6:30 p.m. According to the Marikina LGU, after Typhoon Karina's onslaught last July, they continued dredging Marikina River and removing silt from drainage systems to increase the water capacity. But Marikina Mayor Marcy Teodoro says their drainages can no longer keep up with the amount of rains these days.
At nakita natin, iba na yung new normal, may new normal talaga ngayon at iba na yung lakas ng buhos ng ulan. Kaya nakikita natin, kailangan i-rehabilitate yung ating drainage system. Talagang nakikita natin, hindi na tugma doon sa lakas ng buhos ng ulan at yung tubig na dumadaan sa mga system drainage natin.
Let's now get an update on Bagyong Enteng from Pag-asa's Rhea Torres. Rhea, good evening. Hello, can you hear us?
Yes, good evening. Good evening din po sa ating mga television.
Okay, first off, anong update kay Enteng? Ang gustong malaman ng taong bayan, Rhea, magpapatuloy ba ang mga pag-ulan at gaano katagal pa?
Yes po, so most likely large parts of northern and central Luzon, expect pa rin po natin over the next few hours yung mga malalakas. So yung latest location niya po as of 7 p.m. po ito, nasa vicinity ng Ilagan, Isabela. Currently still nasa tropical storm category with maximum sustained winds of 85 kilometers per hour near the center and gustinas na umabot po ng 140 kilometers per hour. Yung direction niya naman po, pagkilos niya generally north-northwestward sa bilis na 25 kilometers per hour. And because of yung effects po nitong bagyong Enteng, nakataas po yung tropical cyclone wind signal number 2 and number 1 over large portions of northern and central Luzon. Signal number 2 po tayo over Ilocos Norte, Apayao, Kalinga, northern portion ng Abra, pati na rin po sa eastern portion ng Mountain Province, eastern portion of Ifugao, Cagayan including Babuyan Islands, pati na rin sa Isabela, northern portion of Quirino and northern portion of Aurora. Meanwhile, signal number 1 naman po ay nakataas sa Batanes, Ilocos Sur, La Union, eastern portion of Pangasinan, pati na rin nalaling bahagi ng Abra, the rest of Mountain Province, the rest of Ifugao, Benguet, Nueva Vizcaya, the rest of Quirino, and the central portion of Aurora, as well as the northeastern portion of Nueva Ecija. Yung areas po nakataas yung tropical cyclone wind signal number 2 and number 1, asahan pa rin po natin yung mga pagbugso, malalakas na pagbugso ng hangin na dala nitong bagyong Enteng. Pagdating naman po sa mga pag-ulan, possible umabot pa rin po ng 200 millimeters na mga pag-ulan, especially yung areas na affected nitong bagyong Enteng, more on portions or bahagi po ng northern and central Luzon. Meanwhile, yung habagat naman po is mostly makaka-apekto po sa may southern Luzon area. So included po dyan yung Mimaropa, Calabarzon, dito po sa Metro Manila, possible pa rin po yung malalakas na mga pagbuhos ng ulan.
Rhea, let's put this typhoon into context. I mean, comparing it with Bagyong Karina, how strong is this and what is the level of rainfall that we're experiencing now? Because there have been comments saying parang mas mabilis mabaha ngayon kumpara sa Karina. And kung titignan mo, hindi ba comparable yung dalawa dahil hinahatak din nila yung habagat?
Yes po. So first off, i-clarify lang po natin na itong mga pag-ulan po ngayon or for the past few days, especially over Metro Manila area, is directly caused po ni Karina. So hindi lang po siya habagat. Dahil mismong yung sentro nitong bagyo is sobrang lapit po sa landmass po natin. Hindi po gaya ni Karina na almost nasa karagatan po siya. And yung main influence po ng mga pag-ulan during that time is dahil lang po sa habagat. So mas mabilis po talaga yung mga pag-ulan na or na-accumulate mga pag-ulan ngayon dahil isang bagsak po siya. Depende po sa pagkilos nitong or mga influences ng rain bands nitong bagyong Karina. So malakas po talaga yung mga pag-ulan, especially based po sa latest data natin na umaabot ng mga torrential or intense to torrential rains yung mga apektadong mga lugar.
Okay, Rhea, dati si Karina galing siya sa may Gawing, Kanluran, sa may western portion. Ito naman galing sa Dagat Pasipiko sa eastern portion. Pero balita namin, laman din ng balita, syempre may binabantayan kayong isa pang sama ng panahon. What can you tell us about that? Mukhang mabubuo ba ito bilang isang typhoon?
For now po, we are not monitoring any other low pressure area, tropical cyclone within and outside PAR. So ang main focus po talaga namin sa ngayon ay itong bagyong Enteng at siya po yung nakaka-apekto. And based po sa mga pagtaya po namin, wala po kaming ibang minomonitor besides dito po kay Enteng.
Okay, kamusta naman yung mga dams? Wala na mga nagbabadyang umapaw?
For now po, titingnan pa rin po natin yung latest na data with regards po sa mga dams natin. At base naman po sa latest, kumbaga na datos po, yung mga levels po natin for now is most likely, yung nasa normal levels naman po at nakikita po natin yung normal high water level, yung iba po halos maaabot na. So, lang po tayo sa ngayon kasi mag-aantabay naman po tayo, especially yung mga apektadong mga lugar ng mga areas po na possible na maapektuhan in the event po na magbukas pa yung mga.
Okay, so habagat ang makakaapekto sa Metro Manila, sa Mimaropa, Calabarzon at Northern and Central Luzon naman uulanin dahil sa bagyo. Maraming salamat sa update, Pag-asa Weather Forecaster Rhea Torres.
In other news, President Marcos says the government continues to monitor Tropical Storm Enteng as it moves across northern Luzon. He has ordered authorities to issue bulletins on school and work suspensions as early as possible or before we go to bed, in his exact words. The president also gave assurance that procedures are in place and being followed by local government units as they respond to the storm.
We're prepared for the aftermath of all of this. As usual, nag-forward placement na tayo ng mga pangangailangan. We will just have to wait for the weather to see what it will do. Hopefully, umiwas sa atin. But even if it does not, we have all the elements in place to support.
And true enough, the government has already made a call for tomorrow. Just this evening, Malacanang has suspended face-to-face classes for all levels and government work in Metro Manila and Calabarzon. This is again for tomorrow. This was also announced by Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin. So classes in all levels of private and public schools have also been suspended in Calasiao, in Pozo Rubio, and Dagupan City in Pangasinan, in Apari and Nueva Vizcaya in the Cagayan Valley, as well as in Naga City, Bicol, and some areas in Central Luzon, including Bulacan, Nueva Ecija, Tarlac, and Zambales.
Up next, Chinese Coast Guard repeatedly rammed a Philippine Coast Guard vessel in Escoda Shoal. We'll get insights from geopolitical analyst Richard Heydarian when the big story returns. Stay with us.
Welcome back. You are still on the big story here on One News.
It was the Education Department's turn to come under fire at the lower house today after it appeared they had been slow to procure and disburse equipment, including laptops and books in previous years.
Ang efficiency pagdating sa spending ng confidential funds ay 143%. Congratulations po. Pero pagdating naman po sa regular funds, napakabagal po.
Regarding procurement, I really noticed that mabagal ho kami sa procurement. Okay. I think if you notice for 2024, the books are not arriving on time, Your Honor. We're only starting to deliver books now, and the kids are already in school. The completion of the books will be done by December. Nagulat ako na 4 years old na pala yung mga gamit doon. Since 2020 pa po yung mga kagamitan doon. So we contacted the Air Force and others to help us remove. But and in addition to what Yusek Romero said, there are over 1.5 million items still in Carmona and other warehouses. Laptops, books, furniture. So we're doing our best to get them out para hindi mag-deteriorate yung mga materyales.
Citing audit documents, Representative Jinky Luistro of Batangas said DepEd under former Secretary Sara Duterte had achieved 0% of its target delivery of the following equipment that were budgeted for 2023. 2,349 e-learning carts, 2,648 smart TVs, 12,022 laptops for teachers, and 7,558 laptops for non-teaching personnel. In all, DepEd Director Ferdinand Pitagan confirmed that only 2.18 billion out of 11.36 billion funds for computers, laptops, and smart TVs were spent. The DepEd officials who attended today's budget hearing also couldn't say where the 150 million in confidential funds for 2023 were used, saying they weren't privy to the matter. Meanwhile, the Vice President's controversial children's book, Isang Kaibigan, also came up at the hearing. New Education Secretary Sonny Angara confirmed the illustrators were job order employees of the DepEd, but he says there's no official record of payment for them in the books.
They are employees. Yes, but there is no payment made to them for whatever they did. So it's either they made it gratis or for free, or they were paid on the side. We don't really know because there's no record of official payment to them. But just for the record, they are employees, job order employees of the Public Affairs Service.
In other news, another day, another ramming out in the West Philippine Sea. This time it happened out at Escoda Shoal, just 75 nautical miles off the coast of Palawan. The Philippine Coast Guard says a Chinese Coast Guard ship repeatedly rammed a PCG vessel that dropped anchor there. Gio Robles has that story.
Damaged and dented. That was the state of the BRP Teresa Magbanwa, the largest ship of the Philippine Coast Guard, after she was rammed and struck at least 3 times while on patrol at Escoda Shoal near Palawan on Saturday, August 31st. The PCG released videos and photos showing China Coast Guard vessel 5205 running into the port bow of the Teresa Magbanwa. Then it turns around and hits the starboard quarter of the vessel. A few minutes later, the CCG carried out a dangerous maneuver and rammed the port bow of the Magbanwa. Overall, 10 Chinese ships surrounded the Philippine vessel, which has been on watch at Escoda Shoal for over 4 months due to supposed illegal Chinese activities. But according to China, it was the Philippine ship that started the trouble and deliberately rammed their vessel. They also called the presence of the BRP Teresa Magbanwa at Escoda illegal. This is despite the area falling within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, it only being a few miles away from mainland Palawan.
We exercise sovereignty, sovereign rights, and jurisdiction over the area. So the Chinese Coast Guard vessels are the ones illegally, yung presence nila din are illegal. We are there on a legal basis dahil atin yun. Hindi tayo pwedeng magpaalam sa bahay, sariling bahay natin.
According to Defense Secretary Kiboy, the National Maritime Council is set to meet to discuss the country's next steps. The Foreign Affairs Department, meanwhile, has since reached out to China to protest the incident. The government is also exploring other solutions to this issue, which may become clear in the next few days or weeks.
Well, we're contemplating at the moment possible approaches to this issue. And I think siguro in the coming days or weeks, you'll probably have a better picture of where we're headed on this.
Due to the series of collisions between Philippine and Chinese vessels at Escoda Shoal, other countries have also expressed their growing concerns. The Australian embassy criticized China's unacceptable and dangerous actions. They said all countries must comply with international law and reiterated that the 2016 arbitral ruling is binding. The Japanese embassy also condemned China's use of force to change the status quo. It said Japan stands together with the Philippines by upholding rule of law at sea. The United States has also voiced out their support for the Philippines. In a statement by U.S. Department of State spokesperson Matthew Miller, he asserted that America supports the legal operations of the Philippines within our EEZ. Miller also emphasized that the U.S.-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty extends to armed attacks on military forces, aircraft, public vessels, particularly those of the Philippine Coast Guard, anywhere in the South China Sea. For now, the damage to BRP Teresa Magbanwa will be subject to evaluation. But until it is replaced, it will continue to remain on watch at Escoda Shoal. For News 5, Gio Robles, we are One News.
What do we make of this latest encounter out at Escoda Shoal? Let's get some insights from our guest tonight, geopolitical analyst and vlogger extraordinaire.
Self-proclaimed.
He told me to say that.
Claim.
A man who needs no introductions, Richard Haydarian. Richard, first of all, thanks for being here in person with us. There's lots to talk about. So, Escoda Shoal, Sabina Shoal.
Yeah.
Aside from this incident over the weekend, just last week, August 22, there was another incident with the BFAR vessel BRP Datu Sanday. They were on the way to Escoda. They were also reportedly rammed by Chinese vessels. So I guess the question that needs to be asked there is Escoda Shoal the new flashpoint in the West Philippine Sea?
Well, the flashpoint is the entire area. No, both South China Sea and Taiwan is now Taiwan Straits is now an integrated theater, and you can extend it all the way to the East China Sea, the so-called first island chain. That's why Japan made a statement on this. That's why Taiwan is looking at what's happening. That's why you are looking at what's happening in Taiwan. I think if you look at the images, it's easy to think that, oh, kawawa naman ng Pilipinas, ginana naman tayo ng China. But actually, if you scratch the surface, what we're seeing is that the Philippines is scoring strategic success. So for instance, we were able to finally fortify and also more or less get it out. Leak it out that we fortified our de facto military base in the Second Thomas Shoal. And China has been extremely disappointed by that because the whole 6 years with Duterte and the intimidation that came afterwards was to prevent us from fortifying our position so that pumiga nung BRP Sierra Madre natin. So having successfully achieved that, despite all the intimidations and all of the deep fakes and cheap fakes and everything coming from some of our friends, the fear of China right now is that we'll replicate that success in other contested areas where our presence is not solidified. So Pag-asa medyo solid na tayo dyan. Scarborough, so that was a lesson we learned. If you have no presence on the ground, madali mawala sa'yo yan once it goes down to the wire. So their fear is we'll do the same thing in Sabina Shoal. Now the other week, I think China mistakenly, you can see how paranoid they were, mistakenly thought we were going to bring construction materials to build military facilities there. Yung pala, we were just doing a routine patrol patrols en route to other areas. Di ba? Parang 7 yung sa Spratly group of islands na hawak natin. So you could see how China is so, they're bruised. They're bruised and they don't want to allow Philippines to score another strategic victory. So you can say this is a form of a tactical success for China because they're showing their preponderance of force, their ability to impose their military superiority. But if you look at the big strategic picture, the Philippines is not doing too bad, and we're showing that we cannot be intimidated, and we're plucking, we'll fight back. And most importantly, we have shown that we can do it without the Americans. How many times the Americans offered to escort us, to be more in your face to China, and General Bronner said, no, we can do this on our own. So we're keeping the American option while telling to the world we can do this on our own.
So are you saying the issue here of China is BRP Teresa Magbanwa's long-term presence in Sabina Shoal and possibly its permanence?
Well, the thing is this, it's not like also the situation is perfectly fine, right? Because while we are scoring some strategic success, the risk we're running here is what naval experts like Admiral Ong would call mission kill, because they're degrading our ability to sustain patrols. We don't have infinite numbers of vessels,
That's
including
what I
the
wanted
most
to ask
sophisticated
you.
ones.
We have a photo right now, okay?
Right.
That blue sign, that's the Philippine ship, that's the, I believe, the BRP Teresa Magbanwa, our biggest cutter owned by the Coast Guard. The rest of the red stuff around it, that's all a combination of PLA Navy, militia vessels from China and Chinese Coast Guard. Richard, you're saying we scored some strategic points, but just in a week, they have injured a bunch of our boats from the BFAR. From the PCG.
And I believe that's our biggest.
It is.
Yeah, that's like our flagship. Some of us have visited it personally.
Like you were saying, di ba tayo maubusan ng assets?
Well, that's why there's also now concerted effort with our American friends, Japanese friends, and others to give us more of some of their extra vessels and all. So some of the discussion is that instead of talking about big warships and fighter jets and all that will take years, maybe some of the stuff that the Japanese can give away, some of the stuff that the Americans are using could be given to the Philippines. So ano yan eh, parang tapatan yan eh, diba? I think so far, our ability to sustain presence in the area has not been totally undermined. But nevertheless, there has to be some tactical changes also on our part. Because we cannot do this forever. But from my understanding, so far, our ability has not been totally undercut. But we're paying a price. Kumbaga kung basketball and your star player is scoring the point, pero napapagod na siya, so baka sa next quarter, hindi na siya 100%.
But the image a while ago of Philippine ships surrounded by Chinese vessels kind of reminds me of Scarborough Shoal, the standoff, na we were outnumbered. Hindi ba pag umalis si BRP Teresa Magbanwa doon, the Chinese ships would remain there because they know that we're trying to stay there for a long time.
So
would we replicate that?
I mean, the Chinese have been doing this for quite some time. You know, the using of militia forces, they did that in the Whitsun Reef, for instance, during the Duterte time. In fact, that was one reason that there was a conflagration within the PDP Laban party, and Senator Pacquiao back then openly, you know, essentially broke ranks with President Duterte and wrote a very fierce letter to China. I think China wants us to believe that we're running out of ammunition, that our star players are going to run out of steam, that the next quarter will be theirs. But I think that's where the Philippines has to be, to hold its line, think of how it can get support from all different sides and have maximal level of presence it can have while making sure the mission kill strategy of China doesn't work.
That's where we need our allies.
That's where you need your allies, and you don't need warships, aircrafts from there. It could be small stuff. You can use more privately commissioned. So for me, there's a whole menu of options that we haven't used yet. So a lot of people are saying, oh, the transparency is not working, etc. But the transparency initiative is just supposed to be one toolkit, right, in a bigger box. And obviously, over time, some of these toolkits are going to run out of steam, just like your good players. Right. So you have to rotate it. You have to bring in. You know, honestly, the way I look at it, again, I'm not underestimating the costs that is putting on us. But the way I look at it is, this is part of our strategic maturation. Because we're not the first country to have experienced this. The Malaysians have been doing this with the Chinese from 2019 to 2021 successfully, when they unilaterally pushed for exploration in some of the areas claimed by China, by Petronas. And eventually they won out once the Americans and others came in. The Indonesians, the Vietnamese have been bullied by China right and left, but they keep on going. So I think we are also assuming that China will have infinite willingness to risk confrontation and potentially drawing in America. So a lot of this is also psychological warfare. A lot of this is also a lot of standoff. And a lot of this is also making Philippines think twice about asserting its claim. So I think the government's approach is correct. You know, hold your horses, don't panic, just continue to do it, and don't escalate it. Because once you escalate, kaya hindi tayo lumalaban. Kasi we escalate it, you give excuse for China to impose its superior will. But as long as we're not doing that, we also have another option, we didn't mention, more arbitration cases. Right? Because all of these things they're doing are in violation of different forms of international conventions and laws.
You're right that the U.S. has repeatedly offered to escort the resupply missions. In fact, just last week, U.S. Indo-Pacific Command Commander Samuel Paparo was just here, which is a very high-level visit. And he himself said, you know, we stand ready to support the Philippines on this endeavor. And yet the AFP keeps saying that we want to do this ourselves for now. Is that the right way to go?
Yes, it is very much the right way because I think the part of this diplomacy is also with the rest of ASEAN. We just had a joint Coast Guard patrols with the Vietnamese. The Indonesians started sending feelers that they want to do a joint ASEAN naval drills in the area. The Malaysians say what they want to say, but behind the scenes they're also worried with China. So you want to tell these ASEAN countries, we're not America's proxy. We're not America's deputy sheriff. We can do this on our own. But America also saying this reminds China that there's a ceiling to this. If you use armed attack, Americans will come in. Now, having said that, it doesn't mean I have no critique or proposal whatsoever. My idea is eventually the Americans and others have to consider giving us some of their excess capacity or some of their vessels and also that the mission kill situation doesn't happen. And those are the things that we have to quietly negotiate
But how
behind the scenes.
fast can we turn that around? I believe the Teresa Magbanua, the cutter, the biggest boat in this PCG's arsenal, that came from Japan, right?
That came from Japan, but there are a couple of others coming from Japan. So Prime Minister, well, former Prime Minister Kishida was here the other year and he promised, again, half a dozen more. So there's a lot. And the Japanese Coast Guard is one of the biggest in the world. The American Coast Guard is significant. You can also talk about fast boat patrols. So the menu is actually very wide if you talk to really naval experts and all. And you know, I'm in conversation with our friends and allies. In DC, for instance, who are telling us, what can we give you? Not the flashy high-end stuff. It's not the Lamborghinis and Ferraris. What are the, you know, the jeepney Toyota types we can give you? No offense, right? Which is fast. We can transfer to you and you can use it versus, I don't know, their Geely or, you know, their Jack or something like that. So, sorry, I'm a guy. So I'll throw those examples.
We get
That's
it,
my
we
point.
get it.
Yeah, so because people are thinking, oh, where's the American, you know, big fish? This is actually a game. So remember, the Chinese are keeping it at the level of gray zone. This is at the very end of the gray zone, but short of arm attack.
Talking about tools and using them, at which point would be using the tool of the American support in terms of resupply missions be acceptable? Is that for us to have as last option, or could we mix it up with, you know, Japanese patrols, Australian patrols? I mean, what options do we have here?
Well, they say militarization of politics by other means. And speaking of politics, diplomacy is actually going on while we're speaking. So actually, while the AFP is standing strong and saying we don't need Americans, but actually Americans are here, while the Chinese are trying to push the envelope, the DFA is negotiating potentially a kind of an interim agreement that covers a bigger area of the West Philippine Sea. So far, have you seen, we have an interim agreement over the second Thomas Shoal, which successfully allowed us to do RORE missions without any incident. So the Chinese kind of had to concede some setbacks there. Now they're trying to impose it. So there's some proposal to expand it further. So we're talking about different instruments of power of the Philippines. We keep on talking about military and maritime, but there's also diplomacy here that we can also work on, not to mention legal warfare. So all of these things are going together. So actually, by standing strong on the front of Coast Guard and Navy, we're also strengthening the negotiating position of the DFA as they try to say to the Chinese, no matter what you do, we're not going to back out. And the more you push us, the more allies will come in. Maybe we want us to have a face-saving interim agreement whereby we'll agree, we'll disagree to agree to disagree. Meaning,
What about that?
We'll agree to
we'll have
disagree.
all
You
many different
there.
interpretations.
We'll agree
right,
to
right.
disagree.
To disagree.
You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's not like both sides agree that they have different interpretations. Both sides even disagree that they have agreed to have different interpretations.
Yes,
right? So it's
exactly.
a very fuzzy thing, but so far it's working.
As long as there's an agreement at the end.
As long as
What
there's
have we learned?
face-saving.
What have we learned about this provisional agreement we were able to have with China?
Good question. I mean, you have to give diplomacy a chance. You have to be creative with diplomacy. And part of the creativity is plausible deniability, ambiguity, which China has been using so masterfully all across this year. So we're learning from China how to split the difference without making it clear what is the split and what is the difference, right? And this is a jiu-jitsu we'll have to play with China for the next generation. because this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. I think our folks think that, Duterte thought by just being nice with China, everything will be fine. Pinoy thought that by standing to China, everything will be fine. I think Bongbong Marcos is slightly more sophisticated by realizing this is a long game. Don't panic. Don't do anything excited. Accept some setbacks. Push for some gains. And let diplomacy have its time.
Okay, since you brought up Duterte already, let's talk about local politics naman. I know you've also got
Blogger
thoughts.
Extraordinary, yeah.
In your
You've also got thoughts on it. Okay, what
On
is
Twitter.
going on with local
Facebook.
politics in a nutshell? What did you make of all the hearings, especially the OVP budget hearing from last week?
Well, I mean, just I was talking to some congressmen who should have been informed. They categorically denied that there's an impeachment.
Okay.
I don't know where
Everyone denies that
Vice
there's an
President Zara
impeachment
Duterte
plan.
got it. Probably from my podcast, she got the idea of impeachment or something like that. My
If there was
understanding.
a plan, would they really tell you, though, on
Of course,
TV?
they won't tell it on the record. But nevertheless, a lot of these people won't deny that there could be legal grounds still to push for the impeachment. What they're saying is that politically there's no nefarious plot. But they won't deny that legally, whether it's a confidential fund issue or the catch-all case of betrayal of public trust, you can interpret that quite liberally in order to provide a ground. But the election is coming really soon, in a month, and then the registration for certificate of candidacy, and then the break will come by the end of this month. So there are multiple elements there, but my understanding is people want to I call it the boiler room strategy. Just pile on pressure and pressure and pressure on the Dutertes, make them make more and more and more mistake, so that either they become radioactive in the upcoming elections, meaning everyone else will think they're too rogue to ally with them as the opposition, or even force Sara to reconsider the office of the vice president. She already made step 1, which is get out of the cabinet. Maybe step 2 is to run for mayor in Davao to protect the rear. Because as we speak, there are people who are saying maybe the Nograleses will finally make another strong run for the top post in Davao. So this is the double Cold War happening right now. So at the international level, the Philippines is navigating U.S.-China Cold War while holding our ground. At the domestic level, this is Duterte-Marcos Cold War, right? And both these Cold Wars are asymmetrical. At the West Philippines, China has the upper hand, but domestically, the administration has the upper hand.
Are you
ahead
not
of the midterm
afraid that
elections.
all this so-called, I'm going to put them in quotation marks, bullying towards Dutertes by pretty much everybody else, including the traditional opposition, do you not think this will actually
Work in their favor?
Work in their favor. I mean, there's still about almost 4 years to go in the Marcos
The
administration.
Filipinos love
An
underdogs.
underdog.
Especially
Yes.
if she gets impeached. Especially if she gets impeached.
I think if there's one thing we've learned so far is Vice President Sara Duterte has a hard time showing herself as a victim. She built her national profile, quite
With
literally
the-
like
yeah.
that. And I noticed if you watch her very carefully during her press conference, one of the few spontaneous she gave, she said, they're going after my brother, my husband. Suddenly her voice broke for a second. I could imagine she could go in tears, and then suddenly she held herself. So she's instinctively built herself into this strong, uncompromising woman, which has its value. But now nahihirapan siya to show a victim side. So that's why in the budget hearings, she could have shown herself as a victim, this is persecution. But when she fought back aggressively and used all of these non-sequitur attacks on the people, so I'm not sure her skill is at the level of her father in terms of spontaneity and all. Some would even say, critics would say, she's a poor replica of her father, and some would say the father itself was not
Although
the
I just came from
best
Davao, and
entity.
there's this impression there that the Duterte family has been betrayed by the Marcos family, and that Davao is being ganged up upon. I mean, even with this Kingdom of Jesus Christ issue, their economy is down, and
They're not getting the budgets, a lot of things, right?
Well, didn't the ex-president call for de facto rebellion? I mean, worse things could have been done to them than, stripping them of budget or whatever accusations they're throwing. I mean, President Marcos Jr., I think, has been very patient. Some would say over-patient with them. I mean, that incitement to rebellion could have been a basis for some major political or legal move. No, my sense is, first of all, there's this deep grievance among our brothers and sisters in Mindanao, including in Davao, that people in Imperial Manila, have this negative thing about them.
And
Either
that was
they
actually
ignore
brought
them.
up with me. That
That always comes up.
this issue was
Even
raised.
us from
that's
Baguio
something
have
new.
that sense
Yeah.
about people in Manila, that you have this kind of Imperial Manila mindset.
That's what
So
he campaigned on.
Yeah, that will never go away. I think and then there's another point. If you notice the kingdom of the whole Kiboy sect, they keep on mentioning US, US, US. And they try to portray it not only as a betrayal of Marcos of Dutertes, but Marcos being supposedly a proxy of America. So the FBI wanted list of Kiboy is being connected to BBM, West Philippines. It's a very convoluted
There is
narrative.
a sense of that, though,
There is a
especially on
sense of
social
that.
media.
Yes, and it has its certain resonance. What I'm not clear is whether the resonance extends beyond certain quarters, particularly in Mindanao. So if you look at the surveys, sobrang wide yung spread.
Yeah.
Like approvals of SAR are universal in Mindanao, but significant down in Luzon areas and up for grabs. If you look at West Philippines issue, sobrang galit ang tao sa China sa Luzon. Biglang sa Mindanao, it's a different point of view.
Yeah.
So you can see kind of a multiverse, political multiverse
I can see the
situation
effect of
there.
this in 2028, but how about the midterms next year?
This is where there's a debate, right? So there's a school of thought that says, now that Marcos is the administration, they have the machinery ahead of the elections. The government has the leverage over legislators to push for impeachment or to pin down the Dutertes or leverage the institutional states. Because pag tapos ng midterm elections, by 2025, ang usapan 2028. And if Sara is still number one, yari ka. But there are others who are saying, well, not necessarily. It's not like Sara is the only game in town. The Tulfos are doing fantastic in surveys. Senator Raffy Tulfo is already leading in some of the surveys for president, and Erwin Tulfo or Ben Tulfo will be competing for number one. Baka labanan pa ng mga Tulfo yan. So it's not like Dutertes are the only game in town. So I think it's still up for grabs whether Marcos still has a time to marginalize sufficiently the Dutertes. But clearly, what is clear to us is the Dutertes are fighting for survival. And when the Dutertes are cornered, they're capable of anything, whether self-defeating or a brilliant political move. So never underestimate the Dutertes. For everything I say, I never underestimate Dutertes, and I always say,
so you've learned
watch
your lesson.
very carefully. No,
wait. Before
2015, I said Digong is a dark horse.
Oh, you did?
2015,
Okay.
August.
Right.
I'm one of the first people ever on TV who said never underestimate that guy. So I think people misunderstand. They think that I'm dismissive. So I use humor. Right, to make sure my bashers don't get too angry, but I never underestimate the Dutertes.
We're being told to wrap up, but one last very quick question, which is what do we know about the International Criminal Court? Your good friend Ronald Llamas is convinced the warrant is going to be issued sometime September. It's already September.
Well, Justice Carpio said that on my podcast. I was also at The Hague and made my own questions around and Marites a little bit around and all. You never get a straightforward answer because the ICC is very,
secretive.
Some countries had to use intelligence services to get to know whether the warrant of arrest, for instance, for Netanyahu will come, for instance, right? So there's a secrecy around it, but the things that is getting out, ang tanong lang is, will there be an issuance of blue notice or red notice? Because if it's red notice, ibang usapan yan.
So kulay na lang ang pinag-uusapan.
So it's almost inevitable. The question is not only the time, but what color of notice. And people they can go on Google and see what is the meaning of yellow, orange, green, blue, red.
If it's red, he's going to get hunted
go
down.
For arrest the guy.
Yeah,
but if it's blue, it's more like more gather of information.
Yeah.
Okay. So
red lang yung scary, kumbaga.
Red lang yung scary. So if you're Bato de la Rosa, especially Senator Bato and all, I think Senator Bato de la Rosa will not be reacting the way if he's not also hearing something. It's not like kaya some geniuses were saying, why would Haydarian and Carpio say that? The other side, it's like, you think we're the only one who have our sources? So ang tanong dito is, anong kulay ang bulaklak na lalabas or something?
Ang bulletin.
That sounded wrong, but you know what I'm saying.
Talk about a euphemism.
Happy September, by the way.
Happy
It's only just the third day of September. We will leave it there. Thank you so much for all your insights. I'm sorry, second day, you're right. Thank you so much for all your insights, geopolitical analyst, and again, I have to say it, vlogger extraordinaire, self-proclaimed Richard Haydarian. Talking about the manhunt for Apollo Kiboy, it's entered its second week with the fugitive doomsday preacher still nowhere to be found. Vice President Sara Duterte, meanwhile, who attended the Kingdom of Jesus Christ's anniversary over the weekend, says she believes Kiboy is no longer in Davao. Mobile journalist Julie Baiza has that story.
Tensions flared again on the 10th day of the standoff in Davao City between police and followers of Apollo Kiboy's Kingdom of Jesus Christ. On Monday morning, law enforcers forced open another gate near the Jose Maria College inside the KOJC compound. KOJC members claimed the PNP was armed with boxes and other equipment meant for more drilling in the property.
Ang tanong, ano yung mga box na nasa laman na ayaw ipadala
surveillance camera. May tinatago ba ang Philippine National Police? Ang tanong ko, kayong mga pulis, may tinatago po ba kayo?
And as emotions rose, the Davao Region Police Chief Brigadier General Nicolas Torre III took the microphone, ordered police to open the gate and arrest anyone who gets in the way. Later on, police explained that they only want to open Gate 1 of the KOJC compound as a security measure, adding that they have no intention of concealing any PNP activity from KOJC members.
For the record, hindi sinira ni RD ang gate ng KOJC compound. Kami ay umapila sa kanila na kung pwede ay open ang gate kasi patuloy pa rin naman yung ginagawa namin na implementation of warrant of arrest. And kung i-close nila ang gate, ibig sabihin doon kung sino mang tao na nandoon na hindi nila i-open ang gate, he or she can be charged with obstruction of justice.
The latest encounter between law enforcers and civilians came a day after KOJC celebrated its 39th founding anniversary. Their special guest, KOJC staunch supporter, Vice President Sara Duterte. Duterte believes the kingdom's founder, Apollo Kiboy, is no longer in Davao City.
Ako, sir, personally, sa tingin ko, wala na si Pastor Kibuloy dito sa Davao City dahil mahaba yung panahon na pwede siyang umalis na sa Davao City dahil mahaba din yung grandstanding na nangyari doon sa Senate.
But where's the fugitive preacher? In just, here's what the Vice President had to say.
One guess kung nasaan si Pastor Kibuloy? Nasa langit. Hindi dapat ginagawang excuse na malaki yung lugar. Sa sobrang dami ng mga pulis na nandyan sa loob at sa sobrang dami ng pulis na pinadala para mag-execute ng warrant of arrest, magtataka ka, 9 days na hanggang ngayon, hindi pa sila tapos.
KOJC Legal Counsel Attorney Israelito Torion claims to know the reason why police are drilling in Kibuloy's property. They are hunting for gold, something the PNP quickly dismissed.
So another fake news. Definitely no. We are not treasure hunting. We're looking for individuals with existing warrants of arrest from the courts.
Kung ano man po yung nangyayari doon, I'm sorry po, I don't have any, I'm not at liberty to discuss yung detail one by one dahil this might compromise and jeopardize po yung ongoing implementation po ng warrant of arrest.
Still, police say they have classified information that Kiboy is still within the 30-hectare compound. Meanwhile, 3 Malaysian nationals believed to be members of KOJC were barred from entering the country on Sunday, according to the Bureau of Immigration. They arrived at NAIA Terminal 1 but were sent back to Kuala Lumpur with BI saying the travelers intended to participate in quote-unquote anti-government demonstrations being staged by KOJC members.
Time now for a lighter news for sports. The hunt for a medal finish is within reach for Pinoy para swimmer Ernie Goan after his standout performance in the men's 400-meter freestyle S7 heats at the Paris 2024 Paralympics. The experienced swimmer clocked in at 5 minutes and 0.13 seconds, leading Heat 2 and securing third place overall. Goan took control from the start, reaching the first 50-meter mark in just 35.47 seconds and completing the first half of the race in 2 minutes and 28.85 seconds. He maintained his lead throughout, finishing 15.90 seconds ahead of the competition. Only the top 8 swimmers out of the 9 advanced to the medal round, which is scheduled later tonight at 11:30 p.m.
Right, before we say goodbye on this Monday night, here is our big picture tonight. We haven't seen her for a while, but as Tropical Storm Enteng passed the Bicol region, well, here is former Vice President Leni Robredo doing the rounds in Naga City to check on her kababayans amid the rains and flooding. Residents of several barangays were forced to seek shelter in evacuation centers as floodwaters rose. Together with volunteers, the former VP also prepared and distributed hot meals for the evacuees.
Nice to see. I guess she's doing it under Angat Buhay. Nice to see it back in action. And also, who's back on the scene, Patreng Non, who started the community pantry
During the typhoon?
movement.
Pantry, this typhoon?
During this typhoon, I've seen some posts being shared of the the drive that they're doing to help those affected by the flooding and the storm.
Yeah, although the floodings and the weather here is really not the best when it happens, the good news is that you see people coming out, putting their best foot forward every time a calamity hits.
It's really a grassroots movement in many cases, right? Especially for some of these local communities that the government cannot reach anymore or is unable to reach in time.
And dare I say, early campaigning. It is 2025 next year, a
That
month
is
ago.
also true. So we're seeing a lot of people post about nasaan ang Pangulo, nasaan ang Vice President.
Mapunta yan sa tamang bagay. Katulad ng pagre-respond sa typhoon.
Yeah.
At least, di ba, nakatulong pa rin. Kahit naman early campaigning, you can hit two birds with one stone. Or with
Not
one.
that we're saying that everyone who's out there is campaigning.
Of
We're
course.
just,
giving the context.
Giving the context, exactly.
Okay, so kung mayroon kayong extra to give, you can hit up any of these organizations, including our very own Alagang Kapatid,
That's
who
right.
always non-stop taking donations and making sure they get to where they're supposed to.
Yes.
All right, that's it for the big story on this Monday night.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.